Hey, what's going on, New River Battalion? This is the Video AAR for our Spring 2023 FTX. As promised, we want to have a conversation, answer most of the questions and critiques you raised, and give you some context and facts that you may not have had when you wrote the comments in the AARs. First off, thanks to everyone who actually submitted information. We had about a 30% turnout for everybody who went to the FTX. That's really great. We appreciate your feedback. There was a lot of positive feedback that we're not going to waste calories on today. Those comments, we'll hit a couple during this, but those comments allow us to know what worked well and reinforce. And obviously we're going to focus on the things that didn't work as well or that you didn't understand so we can improve and make the next training event even better. Hey, for full disclosure, we're going to show you most of the data from the survey, your responses, provide you some feedback and some analysis. Most of you had read products. It's apparent that most read the packing list and that you read the timeline that's in the operations order. So we're going to adjust to use the operational timeline in the body of the order so everybody's working off the same document and ensure that the packing list is disseminated well ahead of time. The cadet staff will also ensure that all relevant documents are packaged in one email and publication push rather than piecemeal and separate messages. HHC, I'm disappointed in you. Do push-ups. Generally positive feedback across the board. Most of you understood your roles, felt like you were resourced, and were able to adapt to changes. I would be curious to hear from cadets that saw things that were not addressed by Cadre. You have my contact info, reach out. Hey, the opposing forces or OPFOR fell under their respective company commanders and OICs for each company AO. They received timelines and coordinating instructions from those leaders, including products that identified who was in which area of operation. If you missed that, relook the guidance that we think you received from Jenner Johnson and Frank Bianco, and we will direct, however, in the future, OPFOR, platoon leaders, and OICs to watch the rock drill on Zoom at a minimum. All of you can log in on Zoom and watch those, just like the training meeting every Thursday. The lanes were non-negotiable. That's a must-complete event. They were, in fact, the only things that had to happen during the FTX. Everything else was desirable, but not required. What was conditions-based versus what was required was part of the dialogue in the rock drill, the rehearsal of concept drill. If you were confused, tune in next time, as that will help prime you to ask direct questions of your leadership or follow up on information gaps. All of our battalion rehearsals are digitized, so if you aren't in the room, you can still jump in on Zoom. We're not really sure what you meant by communication was uncoordinated, and I certainly saw a different side of the staff in the person who submitted this comment. They all planned remaining events for the semester during their time out at the FTX, and that included the makeup ACFD, all of our forthcoming labs, the battalion run, the award ceremony, the change of command ceremony, the dining out, generated a warn for the fall FTX. They drafted ConOps for nearly every major training event in the fall semester, and unless it was the assistant to the assistant S4 that didn't know they'd be doing distribution operations, I'm fairly confident the staff did know what they were doing. Papa 3 did have some friction. They experienced some resupply issues, some internally produced and some externally produced. We did know the gates were going to be closed, and that was accounted for. That's why the LRPs were placed where they were, and they were supposed to be on different routes. But execution always runs into a couple hiccups. Not sure exactly why P3 had a delay in receiving some of their materiel, but the S4 and company leadership were able to adjust and move the LRP. Whatever latrine you happened upon didn't belong to us. That's probably why it was unserviceable. The areas were reconned ahead of time by Cadre multiple times and cadets beforehand. The overwhelming majority of you feel they grouped and zeroed effectively and appreciated being able to shoot at least twice. Many wanted to shoot more, but resources and time are finite. We'll consider more range options in future FTXs, but the most important task to train on during an FTX are those sticks lanes. That's why the majority of our time is dedicated to that. And the reason why it's most important is a significant amount of your order of merit score comes out of your performance at advanced camp, and most of your performance at advanced camp is based on your performance during sticks lanes. We want you to be able to compete for the branch of your choice. That's why that's the priority. About a quarter of respondents who were in the training population disliked the LRC. It's a must-attempt event at CST, which is why we had to do it. Some of you didn't find the PMI helpful, though most did. Our original PMI plan was a little disrupted when our reservist support arrival was delayed, so that led to MS4 stepping up. But we are going to have a more complete plan for the fall and next spring. Most like the MVG familiarization. Camp-bound cadets will be employing night vision goggles or night vision devices when they go to camp this summer, so that's one reason why I want to familiarize you with it ahead of time. You will certainly see them in any of your future units that you're assigned to. We want to make sure that more cadets get exposed to this in future opportunities. Most found night to day land nav to be valuable, a few did not. Some thought you didn't necessarily do that at CST. You're mistaken. Some cadets do a night to day transition, some do distinct night and day land nav. It is reasonable to assume that some will do it in the future, and we think it's better training, so that's why we do it. If we train you to the more challenging standard, you're going to perform better. It's worth considering too that night into day land nav is a common occurrence at many Army courses and skill badges, including United States Army Ranger School. The qual range instructions came directly out of the Individual Weapons Training Strategy Manual, TC 3-20.40, often called the .40 qualification, .40 manual. Go look up Appendix Echo if you have any questions. Moreover, Staff Sergeant Kent, the Range Safety Officer, briefed cadets on the instructions they should expect and the sequence that they would have to qualify on, including the target tree and where they were shooting from. He might have missed a group, and maybe you were in that, but he did his best to brief all the groups in person. We already addressed night to day land nav, build your skill set because it only gets harder. Conducting foot movements and building grit is a fundamental requirement for future officers. You have to be prepared to fight isolated, outnumbered, and tired. And guess what? You gotta win. Bring Rolos next time. I hear it helps. Your preventive maintenance check and service, or PMCS, of the CCOs as an individual operator is a normal and standard part of receiving and checking equipment. Our dilemma for this training event is without an arms room yet, we have to borrow weapons. And these weapons came from the Virginia National Guard Company in Virginia Beach. They did their due diligence to try to bring us serviceable equipment and sign it over, but time was finite and individuals who received the equipment have to PMCS it upon receipt. We did not have enough batteries on hand. We do know that we'll do that in the future. Some of the CCOs were just broken and some did have dead batteries. The instructions for adjusting all optics are in the back of the zero target. So in the future one, you'll have those on hand up there at the firing positions. But you should be looking at that during your PMI labs. And going forward, we're going to ensure that everyone's familiarized with how to manipulate the optics and zero in the PMI labs and laser shot labs leading up to rifle ranges. I agree that the flow through stations and concurrent training at the LRC could have improved. Some downtime is inevitable when you have finite transportation and people able to drive vehicles. Hey, the original plan was for you to ruck to your ORPs, but Captain Spadini asked for you to be moved. I was ready for you to ruck all night so you can thank him for having mercy on you. At the same time, never be afraid to put down your phone and get to know your buddies or crack open your Ranger handbook or look at the timeline, try to figure out what's coming next. Your management of your time is on you. I saw a lot of glowing faces out there. It might be time to put the technology away and get to know the people. If you ask me to manage your time, you may not like the outcome. Hey, we are very cognizant of the time that we take for major ROTC training events like this FTX. Especially when we think about how it impacts your academic schedule. That specifically is why I told you all the key training dates in the first lab and provided you the documents ahead of time. That's why you have the torch, and that's why you need to coordinate these things far enough out. We will get the mass excusal letters out much earlier in the semester, minimum 3 weeks, probably beginning of the semester, so that you can begin that coordination earlier if you need to. But you need to manage your time on your own. We're not wasting time. The FTX takes as long as the FTX takes. Separating the range from an FTX is just infeasible in a spring semester due to all the other weekend requirements you often have and the availability of places to get you on an actual qual range. So that's why it is and will continue to be part of the spring FTX. Hey, if you didn't know, we coordinated to proctor several exams during the FTX for some underclassmen so that they could still maintain their academic requirements and do training. We're committed to helping you, but we need you to do your part, be a responsible adult, and bring issues up well ahead of time. Nearly all of you found the scenario linkage that your cadre built into your orders to be helpful in understanding how tasks and missions flow in a realistic environment, as well as the 4-hour window to be fairly balanced. We did not specifically ask if anyone thought it was too long, though at least one of you commented, and we'll address that later. Most of you thought it was neither too easy nor too hard. Our focus is on preparing you for combat, and by doing so, that will prepare you for advanced camp. Again, tougher standards equal easier execution. 2/3 of you found the round-robin training to be helpful and the pre-land nav prep to be helpful. The vast majority of you found rotating through positions to be informative. Some of your leadership think it would be useful to rotate mission sets between the ROTC companies, such as Charlie Company Command Teams Lead, Camp Bound Cadet, maybe swapping with someone else, and we'll discuss that with Colonel Coughlin. Statement 4 was a little divisive. The terrain of the land nav course that you executed is quite similar to the course at Fort Knox, as well as most land nav courses I've experienced in my career. It is reasonable terrain to train in for where you can expect to fight in a contested environment. You can thank Mr. Francis for planning lanes to be separated by water obstacles for Oscar and Papa Company so that you didn't have to cross that stream. One of you also said the patrol base location wasn't great. A patrol base needs to be located where you're not going to be compromised. And that may not be convenient nor comfortable. You can handle it, I believe you. One of you also said multiple times that, quote, your patrol base was very far away. You executed no movements longer than 5 kilometers, which is rather short compared to what you should expect both at CST and in combat operations. Ranger up, my friend, welcome to the Army. Urban operations is unfortunately not part of the Cadet Command curriculum, and all of the subcomponents that we touched on are multi-hour and sometimes multi-day training events unto themselves. We simply can't take time away from the tasks we must train you on to train you on things that we want to. More on that later. Hey, part of your role as an MS2 is to develop the underclassmen. I recommend you embrace that, as it's the best way to learn something. Teaching is the best way to learn it. You cannot be too competent on the fundamentals. Those skills are perishable and you may not be as good as you think you are. We didn't receive all the blanks, weapons, and equipment that we asked for. We trained with what we received. Some of you in the Papa Company barracks placed boots on top of your mattresses and left dirt on the mattresses, which got gigged when it went to be cleared. That specifically was why you had to re-clean, and unfortunately that delay precluded you from coming to the Combined Arms Combat Training Facility, or CACT. Urban Ops is optional, though fun. Clearing the barracks was not optional. We will address cleaning supplies later, but resourcing is something we're going to help with. Having an example lane is a great recommendation. Thanks for bringing that up. We've been discussing a pilot within the program, and we expect to execute one in the fall. Hey, we'll see the data on Sunday in a minute, but it's worth providing you some facts to understand what happened, when, and why. Buses were not coming until noon, period. We can't let you on the bus until they're inspected by Cadre and deemed fit for use by contract. We also have to pay the training bill, so to speak. We must clear the training areas, turn in equipment, clean and sign over weapons, clean and sign over barracks, and pack all of our equipment for return. Those are must-do events. In between those, we had what is often called white space, and we want to provide you options for, but not necessarily constrain ourselves to. The platoon competition, or so-called morale event, was one of the things we generated with feedback from your battalion leadership. There were several more layers to a plan and resource, but time precluded us from executing some of it, as we didn't want to hold you after bus arrival. You'll likely see these options in the fall if we have similar time gaps. You were released to board buses within 3 minutes of that being done, right after you sang Happy Birthday to Captain Fall. I see no reason why you can't rotate squads between tasks and mission sets. And in fact, I would recommend you do. Knowing all those roles and how to integrate will make you a better leader, as well as enable you to employ those capabilities more effectively. Get after it. Our opportunities to do practical land nav as part of the training schedule are essentially limited to the FTXs, and we aren't going to trade sticks time for land nav iterations. We have some locally developed courses that we can provide you if you want to run them on your own. I agree that navigating in wooded terrain is a skill and that you must develop it. Get out and explore. Don't depend on ROTC alone to build those strengths. Cadre and coaches should be giving feedback in round. Nothing said in the AAR should be a surprise, so if you didn't do that and you were one of the trainers, fix it for next time. It appears that those that got to experience the urban operations generally enjoyed it, both the contextual framing up front and the senior NCO-led walkthrough of room clearing. 2/3 of you would have not preferred to only do glass houses at the barracks rather than seeing an actual urban objective, and you generally want more of both, including details on how to organize the fight as well as the planning, coordination, and experience of stacking outdoors. As I said before, all of these are much larger training events unto themselves. We're shooting for familiarization to wet your whistle and get you professionally interested. We can mitigate risk appropriately, and if it makes sense with available time in the future, we'll look to integrate the use of lasers for miles potentially, and maybe simulations. Time is finite. As I stated before, we're looking at expanding training options for urban operations, just not at the cost of 6 lanes or other essential pre-CST training. The focus for MS3s is advanced camp, period. They will almost certainly not be part of UO next year, and you're not going to leave earlier on Sunday because the buses weren't arriving before noon. Definitely not what we wanted Sunday to look like exactly, but we've integrated your feedback for next time. Simply stated, you're probably not as good on lane training as you think you are. Once again, you can never be too confident at the fundamentals, and those platoon missions are critical training events we focus on all year long. Underclassmen, you are preparing BMS3 so that you can go crush the advanced camp and then come back and train those behind you. Most of you appreciated going to the barracks and felt you had what you needed to clean them. I think we do need to have a more detailed cleaning plan that is resourced more clearly and synchronized as a deliberate operation, so the staff will plan that for the fall. Most of you enjoyed the breakfast, though a quarter of you would have preferred to eat an MRE only. Weirdos. 2/3 of you enjoyed the platoon competition, 1/4 did not. 3/4 liked the music and commentary at the closeout formation, with nearly as many wanting to see more events and leaders represent their companies. Nearly all of you want to compete against Cadre. I guess we'll see what happens. 1/5 of you didn't like the speakers and mics. I suspect this is related to some of the technical issues we had, but maybe you just dislike speakers and mics. A couple of you did not understand the bus loading scheme and did not enjoy your ride. I feel bad for you. The vast majority of you prefer Jolly Ranchers to Rolos. I think you're crazy. A couple of you don't like candy at all. What's wrong with you?
What?
Bottom line, iron sights are the alternate sights for all weapon systems. Get comfortable. Train as you fight. We already discussed CCOs. We did not have enough time to do a sticks lane on Sunday unless we woke you up earlier, and we still had to pay those training bills. Most of your peers disagree with you on 4-hour lanes, and my assessment is less than 4 will reduce the value of the AARs, which are critical to keeping this event relevant. Keep your peers, superiors, and subordinates in mind. Not every part of every training event is for every individual. Others may need things you don't. One of you questioned staying in the barracks on a night when it didn't rain versus the night before going. We can't control the weather, despite tinfoil hat conspiracies to the contrary, and the point of staying in the barracks was to enable hygiene and equipment cleaning, not to make you comfortable. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. One of you wanted a platoon versus platoon training event. This is not a training objective and would include a lot of significant increased risk. We don't want anyone to catch a BFA to the face. You're just not trained to do that yet. Bottom line, keep the main thing the main thing. The catered meal cost was $4,900 to fuel about 520 people, so that's around $10 a person. That included the preparation and transport of the food, and if you look around Blackstone, Virginia, not a lot of catering options in close proximity besides Subway. The food truck came from Richmond. Your alternative was an MRE, which was available to you on top of the food truck food. We were fortunate to secure 2 of the 4 buses available on Fort Barfoot, despite all the competing units, and that is specifically due to the hard work of Captain Bowen, Sergeant First Class Nevergold, and Staff Sergeant Dement. You guys rock.
Yeah.
Again, the alternative to bus movement was walking or waiting. You should be filling that time, if you get it, by taking some initiative. Having another location for personnel that have reduced mobility is a great idea, and I think we also need a concurrent training plan for them. They may integrate with the staff in planning, or we can find things for them to do even though they're not able to move around with their platoon. We are well aware of your homework and absolutely want to enable you to do it. Nothing's planned in a vacuum. Buses weren't coming before noon. You know training event windows at the beginning of the semester. Plan accordingly. We did not place chem lights on the land nav points because they are a crutch. Those were from a previous unit. Get good. Luck is not a significant factor in land navigation. Skill is. Build your capacity to terrain associate with your dead reckoning fails. Now, unfortunately, the Radford bus was canceled by the contractor at the last minute. They're never a last thought. However, we do need our leaders over at Radford to integrate into the planning process, and we need our leaders at Virginia Tech to reach across the aisle and make sure that everybody's on the same page. This is critical to having a synchronized organization. Radford cadets, I challenge you to join the leadership and the staff and make sure that the peculiarities of your program and the distances you have to travel that might be distinct from some of your peers are addressed. You should have eaten your MRE. Hey, I was also quite bummed about the aircraft. For awareness, it wasn't the precipitation between us and Richmond that prevented them from flying, it was the high winds on Saturday. They were able to fly the next day, and if you missed it, there was a flyover over our training areas and they were waving down at you. Having lane OICs at the top may be a good adjustment, but again, OPT4 OICs and company commanders are in charge of their OPT4. Get after it. Conditions-based means not time-driven, just like real operations. You should be asking for guidance if you really are lost in the sauce and your leaders do in fact owe you some feedback. Even if that's, I'm not sure, let me ask. Tactical patience is a requirement as a professional, and unexpected events occur on the battlefield. Stay frosty. Sleep and changing equipment or socks is part of your priorities of work. Security and training come first. No platoon had less than 5 hours of sleep outside of security plans, which is enough time to get rest and do recovery. One platoon trained past midnight. Accountability of your weapon systems is paramount, my friends. They also did not execute a security plan before they were woken up at 05. 4 hours is sufficient to operate effectively in combat. If it was easy, everyone would do it. We absolutely can integrate imagery into orders, and if you had asked your higher headquarters, the Cadre, leaders would have provided you additional intel and information. It never hurts to ask, and there will be products and other info available if you ask for it. Hey, here we are at the end of the AR. We've shown you the data. We've tried to answer most of your questions. I hope this was informative. I've tried to provide you specifically as much context and factual framing for what happened so that you can integrate that and continue to improve through the AR process. We value your feedback. Thanks for contributing. Stay awesome, get better every day. River Forge.